We had an interesting case in Park City. I mean, in Evanston, Wyoming. The man who ran the taxi company up there. He came down on 2 canes to see me. He could hardly get along because he had such a bad hemorrhoid condition. He had been operated on twice and hemorrhoidectomy, but now they refused to give him the 3rd time because they said there wasn't enough scar tissue, or there was not enough material left there to even crochet it together, let alone sew it together. And so they said he would just have to suffer the rest of his life. Well, he didn't like this idea. So he came to us. We generally get the culls and get the last results, but they work, and that's the nice part about it. He came, and we gave him the instructions of what to do, and this was it. And it's a little hard to understand because of what we do use. But to tell you what a bad hemorrhoid case is, we've had a number of them come to us with their hemorrhoids hanging down 6 inches below the anus. And it has to be shoved back in again, a pad put on, and harness holding it up. This is a severe case, and they are mighty glad to get them cut out, but that's only the beginning. They're working on the effect and not going to the cause. And here's the thing, and so the cause, we've had many amazing cases, and one of them I'll never forget was up at by one of our colleges. A woman had told us that her hemorrhoids had protruded 6 inches, and she was having this same problem. What we had her do was work up to a teaspoon of cayenne 3 times a day, taken orally. This is a little warm going out, of course. But when those hemorrhoids are inserted, we also oil a button of garlic and put in the rectal area as far up as can be pushed. And then we follow that with an oak bark suppository. You take oak bark powder and mix it with glycerin and make a suppository. Put the suppository in the refrigerator so that it'll harden. And now that's inserted. And it's left there overnight. It's done just before retiring at night, the garlic and the oak bark. The oak bark being astringent, it starts rebuilding the calcium deficiency in that area. And as an astringent, it starts pulling it in tighter and making it up to a good firm area. Within a matter of a month to a month and a half, we have had results of these going back up into place and staying. The garlic goes in and gives healing because it is a healing herb, but it also kills any infection. And the oak bark rebuilds the calcium deficiency. We always, with every one of these cases, are never done with them until we go to the cause back of the cause. And the cause back of the cause is diet. And this is part of the program, and you are never done with your job with a patient until you have gone to the final cause. And this is important. Yes?
Not to jump off too far, but when you were mentioning the cayenne, the question, and stopping bleeding, how would that work if a major artery was cut, say in the arm or the wrist or something like that? Would the cayenne actually stop that type of bleeding?
Yes, it will. We can cite many cases of this. What happens is, as was explained here by the doctor, the cayenne equalizes the bloodstream from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. A case where a boy 8 years old was shot by his little brother in play with a bullet that went into his bowel, took off part of the adrenal gland, part of the lung, hit the spinal cord, ricocheted after it cut the cord, hit the spine and ricocheted out and made the second hole. and the blood was pumping out both of these. Right, so the neighbor next door heard the shot, and knowing none of the parents were home, she rushed over. Seeing what had happened, she didn't stop with a teaspoon of cayenne, she gave him nearly a tablespoon. And he was in shock, and he just drank it down, no complaints, of course. And by the time she got a phone call to the sheriff and to the hospital, the child was not bleeding anymore. They came from 18 miles away at the Primary Children's Hospital to pick this boy up. And they had told her to shove toweling down in there or he'd bleed to death before they'd get there. Or she just put toweling over it. But when they got there, they put him in the ambulance, and he was talking his little old head off as an 8-year-old will. On exploratory surgery, the surgeon said that he had never seen such a clean job. The lower cavity had very little blood in it. Very little blood, because it had stopped because of the cayenne. Well, this was an extremely interesting case because the spinal cord had been severed. And they made the report that the boy would be a vegetable from the waist down because there was no spinal cord. But by giving him the nervine and the lower bowel, his mother would sneak him into the hospital to him. He grew back the spinal cord. And the spinal cord was renewed. And that boy is walking around talking about herbs today.
What nervine did you use?
R8.
NS?
We have 9 nerve herbs, and those 9 nerve herbs rebuilt. We were just talking this morning, and if you don't mind, I'm going to repeat something we were talking about. I've been asked how many times on calluses. I don't, 3 times. Each time I say, okay, I'll remember this time. Well, my memory's about this long. And so it was mentioned again this morning. Well, calluses, warts, various things on the body that happen that we aren't familiar with and we feel that they shouldn't be there, they're there for a good reason. And I was just reciting a story. Do you mind if I repeat it? I'd been used to calluses and things because as a child, when I'd work out in the garden a little too long, the places on my hands that hadn't been used to the hoe or the rake would get blisters and sores on. And after a while, those blisters and sores would get calluses over them. And it would get toughened up. Well, the subconscious mind, Mother Nature, call it what you wish, knew that I wasn't feeling too happy about those sores. And so it gave me strength and build up an area. Our feet get that way if we travel barefooted for a long period of time. And after many miles, our feet will toughen up. And then after we operate properly and right frame of mind, those calluses will soften down. We have some people, and I've had them in the service, where it has been like alligator hide. And I've had to take a scapula and cut off the layer after layer that has accumulated. Well, this is a dermatitis here. This is a different thing. But the real callus. So I was telling about a man out in an area in Utah that had come to me, Grantsville. He was a very distinguished-looking individual, and as I checked him, I found out that as I was doing reflexology, he had a spot on his foot in about this area, and it was a seed wart. And I said, how long have you had this seed wart? He said, I've had it for quite a few years. He says, I trim it out periodically Says, I have a special razor I cut it out with. I had to be careful not to cut myself. But he says, it keeps coming back. And he said, they've had nothing that would touch it at all. Well, I said, nothing will touch that until your pancreas is adjusted. Because I said, this is a pancreatic malfunction, and this is the evidence in your reflexology showing that you've got pancreas trouble. And he looked at me like I was something else. But he said, well, go ahead, let's see what we can do. Well, I said, to show you that I am right, when that pancreas is healed, I said, that seed wart will fall out. It doesn't have to be trimmed out, it will fall out in your hand. And he looked at me and he said, well, okay. By the way, he said, I am retired from the services. I'm a lieutenant colonel, and because I have a pancreas malfunction, I have a very large check every month. So we went ahead and worked on that pancreas. We worked on it internally, of course, and we did the reflexology, everything else that went along with it. And so one day he came in all smiles. Months had passed. And he said, you know, a very interesting thing. I was to get my yearly checkup at Fort Douglas, Utah, to see that they didn't have to decrease or increase my pancreatic check. And he said, that morning, he said, I bathed to get ready to go up there before putting on my uniform. And he said, as I was in the tub, he said, I was bathing and the seed wart fell out in my hand. He had been trimming this for many years. And he screamed and he yelled for his wife, and she came in and he held out the seed wart. And she said, how did that come out? And he says, it just fell out. He said, I happen to know now that my pancreas is healed. He said, let's see what the boys say when I go up to Fort Douglas today. And so the regular sergeant or whatever it was that always gave him a checkup came in, and he hummed and hawed around and got the second lieutenant, then he got the first lieutenant, then he got the major, and it went on up. And finally he wound up with highfalutin officers checking him over. And so the last officer said, well, I think we better have a meeting. And a group of them went over in the corner and they came back and they said, we've got some news to give you. The news that isn't too good is that you're not going to get your big check every month. The second news is that your pancreas is healed. He says, and never in the history of Fort Douglas, Utah, in all of our pancreatic malfunctions way back, have we ever had anybody that's been healed. They always get worse. This is our first case. And he said, you won't get a check anymore. And he says, well, you know where to put that check? So, I thought it was quite interesting, yes.
Doctor, I had the same thing happen to me. I had a place in the bottom of my foot in the same place. You know, I had a nail hole in my, when I was about 10 years old. It got about the size of a 50-cent piece. And I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital and have it cut out because it never bothered me, but it just kept getting bigger. You know? So I took your formulas about 3 or 4 months straight, and I was reading in my bed right before I came here this time, and I reached down. I had a way of playing with when I was reading. You know, I reached down for my foot.
Yeah.
I reached down for that, and I hadn't did it for a long time. I reached down, and boy, it scared me. I said, the same foot, I thought something wrong with my mind. I looked at my other foot. I said, maybe I got the wrong foot. Honestly, and I couldn't figure. I said, well, I wonder what herbs had helped me. You know, I couldn't figure out. I said, gee, I said, if I know what herbs that, what did I be a millionaire? I said, I'll bottle that. And I said, I'll make $1 million out of it. And I said, and when I got your newsletter, that's when I got on the telephone about 10 minutes later. That's why I came out. And one of the things that brought me out, along with the other herbs, just helped me so much. But that I couldn't figure out, you know, because I hadn't read enough about your formulas to know that. Thank you very much.
All right. I think it's exciting when you get into these things. Maybe I'm not just bright enough to know otherwise, but I like it. It takes the monotony out of the routine program. So much we As we progress along, we will find little oddities all through life that will change conditions. Good morning, Lotus. She's got two of the cutest kids.
Huh? Egomaniacs, okay.
They have prepared me a delicious tea of alfalfa, ginger, and honey. All right, no reaching, you'll get your wrist broken. Nectar of the gods, ambrosia, honeydew, moonbeams. This morning, we're going to go on into the subject that we didn't get finished, and that is emollients and emulsions. These are those things that will break loose congestion, which I have, and help get rid of them. And so you can think a lot about it as I cough through the lesson. Also remember, there is a statement that fits into this nicely. Physician, heal thyself. Chickweed. This is one of our greats. And you know, how many of you know chickweed when you see it? Yes, isn't that a delicate little plant? It's so sweet, and the little stems curl up, and finally they are so sweet and so tender and so loaded that you can't get the rest of the vegetation out from under them. And they just smother everything. But whenever you have chickweed in your garden, don't just pull it up and throw it away. Pull it up, dry it, and make tinctures, ointments, or teas out of it. With chickweed, this has been the answer for one of the most irritating things that mankind, or in this case, womankind, can understand. Because there is something that is called the itch. The itch, and it's generally in places where you don't scratch it in public. It's very irritating, and it has been hard to take for many, many people. I have made more friends over the years by handing a secretary or a clerk or some lady individual that was squirming a can of chickweed ointment. It gives quick relief. I was never so shocked as when I saw how frank advertising can be. I had known for many years, others had known, but it hadn't been made public, that we get the itch oftentimes in the groin areas from wearing nylon, synthetic cloth, and this will not allow the area to breathe. It will also not allow the liquid to leave the area, and so it stays there, and that liquid accumulates, which is acid, heavy with toxins. And that toxic condition is the cause of the itch. So they finally came out with a great big billboard. It said, "You got the itch?" I was so shocked the first time I saw it. And then it says, "Use our ointment." It didn't say, "Check your underwear." It says, "Use our ointment." And they made a fortune out of it. They finally cooled the ad. I don't know whether it was public opinion or what. But it got to a point where pantyhose and nylon underthings and men's shorts that were made of synthetics started to get a cotton crouch. And it was needed so badly. But oftentimes people don't even think of that, and they still buy the old type. When that itch gets so bad that you could dig the flesh out, or climb the wall, or hang from the chandelier. That's the time that you go home at night and you prepare a bowl of chickweed tea and sit in it. Unless the itch is someplace else. When you go to bed at night, it's very advisable to put a fomentation over the area, dip the flannel into the chickweed, and in this case make a concentrate, and put over the area and leave it on all night. And then during the daytime, have your chickweed ointment made up. And we told you how to make your mullein ointment, make your chickweed the same. And it is terrific. Chickweed has been so short for so long because very few people think of the great value in it. We had come to us in, I'll never forget it, Alpine, Utah. I just finished a series of lectures, and I was cleaning up the podium, and a young lady came in. She hadn't been to the lecture, and she said, "Could I ask you a question?" And I said, "Why, yes." She said, "I'm rather baffled. I have a baby that is a little over 6 months old, and when the doctor handed me the baby when it was born, it was covered with eczema from the top of its head to the bottom of its feet. It had eczema over its entire surface, the most horrible looking present that any doctor could have ever given me from my womb." And she said, I just laid there and bawled. We got dermatologists, we got specialists, we got our own family physician, we did everything we could, and they could not do a thing with this eczema on the baby. They tried every type of ointments. They tried every type of tinctures that they could get, and nothing would work. "Please," she said, it is awful. It is such a beautiful child. In fact, she was carrying the bundle, and she took the blanket off, and as she unwrapped the baby, I had a dark suit on, and it covered me with scale from that baby, eczema scales. And she said, "I'm sorry to get this all over you, but this is what I go through daily. What can I do?" And I said, "Where do you live?" "Well," she said, "I live down by the golf course down here, a few miles down." I said, "Have you got chickweed down there?" And she said, "I'm having a terrible time because it's climbing all over our corn and our peas and our beans and everything else." Well, I said, "Get that chickweed and make it up into gallons of tea, and get your bassinet for the baby, and put the baby in the bassinet and fill the bassinet with chickweed tea." Now I said, the baby will be lying there and its head will be sticking out and maybe a hand once in a while. So I just said, take a ladle and baste the baby so that you got the chickweed all over it. And she got the idea, and she says, "Fine." I said, "Now do this at least 3 times a day." "You're nursing the baby?" "Yes." I said, "All right, you drink pints and pints of chickweed tea, fresh made chickweed tea. If the baby seems thirsty, and instead of giving it water or some other type of liquid, give it chickweed tea." That baby was completely healed, not another 6 months, but in another few weeks. That baby was completely healed. The crazy part about the whole thing was her husband had warned her not to go to that herb man. He says, "I don't want any weeds on my kid." And finally, she came in desperation while he was on shift working. And he went out on a job, construction, and when he came back 3 weeks later, she had the baby all dressed up in the cutest little outfit, the little bonnet and everything, all healed. There was no scars, there was no eczema on its body. And she held the baby up and said, "How do you like it?" "Okay. What's for dinner?" "Don't you think your baby's cute?" "Yeah, what you got, a new dress on it?" "What's for dinner?" That's about as intellectual as this gentleman was. And she said, "Well, don't you notice there's no more sores and no more eczema?" Yeah, that's right." "Oh, you found a new doctor?" "Yes." Is he in Salt Lake?" "No." "Where?" "Well, he's down this way. He's not that weed guy." And she said, "Yes." He said, "I told you not to go there." He said, "This is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I'm taking that baby immediately to the hospital and getting it sterilized. I'm taking that baby and getting it adjusted because you've wrecked it. You've put all this junk on it." She said, "I could have killed him. He was so ignorant." And she said, he left home. And this was months later. She said, divorce proceedings are now in motion. And she said, "You know, I'm glad to get rid of him." That was an awful thing to say, but out of the meeting, she had the cutest little baby you ever saw without eczema. Well, just remember, these very weeds, that always hurts me here, because I used to get paid 50 cents a hundred for the plantain weeds that I would pull. The cemetery would pay me a penny for 50 plants. And now we pay $4.50 and $5 a pound for it. So it isn't weeds, it's called herbs. So please, refer to chickweed as an herb and not a weed. But that which we used to trod underfoot, we find now is precious and very, very valuable. And that is why it pays to know these things. I just mentioned one little old herb, chickweed, and there are 3,500,000 herbs on earth today. And there are so many of them that are specifics. They are exacting, they are correct. Your hawthornberry, look it up in Potter's Topical Cyclopedia, and what does he say hawthornberry is? Cardiac food. Cardiac food. It is specific, and that's one thing that it's for. It is to rebuild the heart area. Look up under various different types of herbs, and you will find the same thing. They are specific for that. Well, let's remember, some of them are multiple. They will do many, many things. Chickweed will do many things also. It is used for bronchial. It is used for lung. It is used for people who feel it, they will never breathe the same again. Chickweed is used for this. Now, I have never used it on anything stronger than a dermatitis such as eczema. I have never tried it on pityriasis or psoriasis or any of these. Of course, we have our other programs for that. So I have never run full tests, and I just don't know how far chickweed will go. But let's leave the door wide open and use it to the best of our ability. Your marshmallow, we have discussed some, but let me tell about a man who was in one of our classes up in northern Utah. He said, I'd like to tell a story if I could. And I said, yeah, let's hear it. Well, he said, when I was a little shaver, he said, my grandpa said to me, hey, Sonny boy, would you like to go out for a walk with me? And he said, yes, I liked the old gentleman. And he said, we walked out through the fields, and he said, do you know what that plant is? And he said, yeah, that's Cheez-Its. I get those little things off of it and eat them. Do you know any other name for it? And he said, well, Pop calls it marshmallow plant. And he said, yes, now I never want you to forget that plant. He says, I want you to remember that as long as you live. And he said, well, why, Grandpa? Well, he said, when